We'll wait a minute, see if anybody's watching tonight. You never know. You know how that goes. It got quiet in here, didn't it?
Oh, thank you. Overshare.
Y'all shoot.
Yeah, saving the tree.
That's good.
Well, let me start. We'll make a few announcements and then we'll go over our prayer list together. I want to remind you that this coming Sunday is our youth Christmas program. They will start after we get all the formalities done at the beginning of the service. And then when they're done, I will preach a brief sermon according to how long it takes them. I know some of y'all are thinking he's never been brief in his life, but I will do my best, okay? I prepared one of those faucet sermons. You can turn it off and turn it off anytime you need to. But anyway, looking forward to the youth Christmas program. Appreciate everybody's had a part. A lot of prep has gone into this. A lot of people worked hard putting together props and backdrops. And don't forget to tell everybody you appreciate it. A week from tonight, 21st, I don't know if y'all know it, but Christmas is a week from Sunday. And if you're not ready, I wouldn't even start now. I'd just put it off till after the first of the year. But anyway, Christmas is a week from Sunday. So the 21st, Pastor's Christmas Fellowship. And I don't know, hey, Brother Beetle, where did Joel go?
They had something else to go out there.
We didn't put a time, I don't think, when we were going to start that. But anyway, we'll get that in the bulletin this week. Joel always does this.
Yes, ma'am.
Christmas, one service, Christmas morning at 9 o'clock, singing and preaching. And then we'll be ready to go home and y'all can celebrate with your families. Sunday, I made mention of a need. Brother Norcillus told me about a Haitian ministerial student he has. His name is on my phone. I can't pronounce it. He's 26 years old, so it's not like he's just a young kid starting out, which it wouldn't matter if he was. But there'll be a little more stability there. But we need people who would be willing to commit to pay $10 a month toward paying for his school. It's going to cost him $200 a month to go to seminary. Somebody in our church has paid for the first year, so that's been taken care of. But people, I've had 2 families come up and say they wanted to contribute, and if y'all are interested, let me know. People have asked how we would give that money. I'm talking to Brother Norcillus' son, Preswa. We're texting back and forth, but trying to get it set up. They have a website in the United States called Mountain of Hope. I don't know if it's .com or .org, but I'll find out. But you can go on and pay to support your student on the website. And if we can get him on there, people can go and pay toward his support there. Any other announcements? Anything else? Oh yeah, Christmas caroling. I left that off. The 18th, Christmas caroling. That's this Sunday afternoon. Christmas caroling, p.m. So Joel has begged for younger people to come and help them. Some of us older people can't take the cold anymore. I mentioned to Miss Mary one night when I went the last time. I said, you know what? We're the ones that used to go Christmas carol to. But anyway, well, let's take time to look over our prayer list. I want to welcome those of you who have joined us on Facebook Live. I hope it's coming through all right. Yes, I have a suit on because I worked a funeral today and it was a late funeral. I wasn't going to change clothes after that. And so I don't always look this spiffy on. This is my funeral clothes, okay? Don't look this spiffy on Wednesday. I know. Where did I do it? Did I drop it?
Yeah.
I drop it in the parking lot? I thought I put it in the car. That's my funeral tie. Don't want to lose that. Thank you. Tomorrow morning. All right, let's take time to go over our prayer list together. I didn't get any updates from Sunday. If I did, I didn't write them down, so I wouldn't remember it. But I'll just kind of go over this and then add to who we need to mention tonight. Pray for our law enforcement. You know, every time they go out, it's dangerous for them. But while most people seem to be in a better mood this time of year, there's a lot of people who aren't. So pray for them. Pray for Brother Norcillus and Kendra Barnett, Kristen Martinez. Becky and I pray for them by name every night. And I'm not bragging, but you all ought to do the same thing. Keep lifting Bob and Nadine Spears up in your prayers. Nadine is taking treatments. Bob is rehabbing. He's gaining some strength, but remember him. I think Tom T. is watching. I'm not sure. Yep, Trini's watching. I don't know if Tom was or not, but keep praying for Tom. He's got a lot of progress to make before he'll be complete after his surgery. Missy Trenham is going to another hospital in January. Pray for them. Pray for Donna Spears. Donna needs our prayers. I'm looking at the ones that are highlighted. Pray for my aunt and my cousin Shirley and Billy Wilson. Keep praying for Austin Crawley. The holidays are always more difficult right after you've lost a loved one. And Austin lost his wife at 63 years a few weeks ago. I haven't heard an update on Junior Goolsby in a while. Anybody heard anything?
I talked to him today, and he'd been hospice bed for 12 days.
Okay.
But the nurse said today his heart's as good as it's ever been. He kind of hit another gear and doing better, and he's not as depressed as he was
Good.
for a while.
All right. Well, keep praying for Junior. Most of y'all know him. He's a good guy.
Yep.
Virginia Benefield, the last I heard she was doing well, but she's kind of comes and goes on her health. Philip Warren had a procedure done this week. I noticed that on Facebook. It went well. Might highlight him and remember to pray for him. Pray for our nation. Pray for Charlie Washington. Charlie's life changed drastically in the last few years and in the last few weeks. Merle is doing well. Merle's sister is doing well. We added Gwen Morris, I think, last week, and Elliot Shue, the family of Ronnie Allen. Here are some that I received calls on today and got updates on, and I know there will be some you all want to mention, but how's Lonnie doing? I know he was back in the hospital.
He's going through kidney failure now, and they haven't decided how they're doing.
Okay.
In fact, I think maybe a lot of it is a combination of medicines that he's taking, maybe causing his kidney problems, so
Okay.
they're waiting on him.
All right. Keep praying for Lonnie. We had Scott Davis, that's Mary Hoosier's grandson-in-law, Cassie's husband. We had him on our prayer list. He was diagnosed with leukemia. It was a form of leukemia that's treatable, and he's having some other problems, and they think it's medicine related. And I didn't look at my prayer list today because I was busy, but I wrote him down.
He's pretty back on?
Yes. Our friend Rick Reed, I mentioned Rick Sunday. Rick was back in the hospital today. Rick is having liver problems, and he's pretty serious shape. And last thing I said to him before I went to help with this funeral, I said, "What can we do for you to help you?" He said, "Pray that I get in to see a liver doctor." So y'all pray specifically for that. Someone, I think it may have been, it'll come to me in a minute. Don't tell me.
Okay.
Anyway, it won't come to me. The family of Rita Laird, Laird, was posted on our church's Facebook prayer group. I know there are others. We have families in our church who were affected by a death. And what was her first name, Jay?
Janice
Edmiston, right?
Edmiston.
No N, right? Edmiston. Edmiston. So the family of Janice Edmiston.
You don't have the N in it?
Nope. No, it's not Edmiston. Edmiston.
Got an N on the end.
Yeah.
Who else? Who else do y'all want to mention tonight? I may have forgotten somebody or overlooked somebody, and I sure don't want to do that.
One of my coworkers, her mom has liver cancer. Her name is Rita Blair. We need to pray for her.
Rita Blair. Did you post that?
I may have.
Well, somebody posted Rita Blair. I remember that. Thank you.
She's doing really bad.
Let's just keep Sandra free from there.
Yes, thank you. Sandra is in the hospital. Just remember her. Anyone else?
Sunday we added Landon Oil, and Debbie Gibson is the lady that works with Christy Jones.
Okay, thank you. Can't remember all these, but appreciate you reminding us, Sue. And I appreciate you taking care of that.
And I need some help.
You can take the Hutchinson twins off, bottom of the right row. They were there Sunday, doing well.
Okay?
Merle told us a group she's doing good, so I think you can take Miss Merle off.
I think you can take Gerald Van Run off. He's doing pretty good.
Okay. I think you can take the Owen family off. That was somebody that Vail knew, and they'd lost a loved one, I believe. Look this list over, and if you see someone, anyone else?
You can take Dad off, Sue. He's doing about as good as he's gonna do for a while.
All right. I had an online prayer request from Kenley Lamberson. She got saved and baptized at our church. She said she had to have a wound vac put back on. Kenley Lamberson. Okay.
We had Megan Moss on there when she was eclamptic, but that baby's 4 months old now.
Yeah.
You can take Dad off too if you need room. Just pray for him when you think about him. You can take
Anyone else?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. I had another unspoken Gage. Unspoken. All right. Thank you, sir.
You could take a page, that was my buddy's wife,
Okay?
daughter, she passed away.
Okay?
You remember Miss Helen Davis that used to come to?
Yes, ma'am.
She's under hospice at home,
Okay.
and she's our neighbor. She lives right next to Wendy Holland, so just pray for her.
Okay.
She's very cranky, and
Well, she's a friend of yours.
Yeah.
What do you expect? Lord, I apologize for that.
yes,
You know it's true, though, Lord.
but she said she just wished the people that was staying with her just go home and she'd be okay. And she's 90-some.
My point?
Yeah.
And my point? I don't know, y'all. It's hot in here now. I don't know if it's a hot air or not, but I'm coming out of this soup coat. My goodness.
Yeah. Oh, no.
What'd he say?
He said he's gonna stretch.
Cheap seats in the back. Anybody else have a prayer request or an update?
We got praise.
Yes.
Jerry.
Jerry had some test run and they came back not cancer.
Oh, praise the Lord.
Amen.
Amen.
That's good. Thank you, Sharon. Anyone else? We want to take as much time we need for our prayer time, and then we're going to pray over these, and I hope as someone leads us that you pray too, and I hope that you'll take them before the Lord as you have time.
Probably could take Alyssa Harmon off too. I think she's
Yeah.
doing better.
All right, anyone else? All minds clear before we go back to Romans 13, verse 8, new section. Romans 13, 8 through 10 tonight. Well, if your minds are clear, in a minute, let me see, I think I'm going to have to take a break. I left my notes in my office. Y'all excuse me, I'm going to go find those notes, and I'm going to ask Brother Beal if he will. No, thank you. Go lead us in prayer. Pray I'll get back, Brother Beal, please.
Father, thank you for the day you've given us. Thank you for the blessings, and thank you for the prayers that have been answered, Lord, that you've heard and responded too, thank you for blessing people that have been sick and are better now. It's always good to be able to take them off the list if they're doing better. We pray for these that have been mentioned that are still having problems. We ask you, Father, that you would hear our prayers on them and that you would heal their bodies and take care of their circumstances, whatever it might be. We ask that you prepare us to worship you Sunday, and we ask that you bless our Bible study and time together tonight. In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen.
Well, one of y'all got my notes, you better get back, because I'll ramble for 3 hours. No,
I think that's part of your notes, that was in the stack.
somebody's got the rest of my notes. Let me see that. Give me that.
It's, whoever that is.
And I'm out of notes too, I'll give
Yeah.
them all that.
Look at your pages and see if yours is an outline front and back. Some of my notes, you got the rest of my notes.
This is quoting you here.
Do what?
Maybe my age.
You got what you need, front and back. Give me the rest of my notes, will you?
You ready to make copies of this?
Let me see. I don't know what page goes with what now, but I got the first one. All right, I'm sorry for the break. If we lost all of you who are watching. It's kind of like a 3-ring circus, you know. We got monkeys here. And elephants. It's a good thing we're a country church. I wouldn't fit in anywhere else, I promise. So how many of y'all are a product of the 60s? You don't have to raise your hand and answer, but I am. I remember in the 60s there was a song that came out that was really popular. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. Any of y'all remember that? All right, see, all you old folks remember that. I don't know why that song came to mind when I started reading this section. But I did some research on this song. Burt Bacharach, you remember Burt Bacharach? He wrote the song, and he took it to Dionne Warwick and said, this song would be perfect for you. And she said, nope, sounded too country for her. And now I can't even remember the name of the young lady, but she was kind of a one-hit wonder. Only song she ever produced, but it went to #1. Well, you got to look back in that era. This was the 60s. Vietnam was going on. Rioting and the race wars in Selma and all across the deep south were going on. And so, what the world needs now is love. Oh, everybody's singing it. And everybody on Facebook Live knows they can join in. Anyway, I chose that title because it connects well with these verses. So you have my introduction, so you can follow along with it. I want to give you a little backdrop, and it's a reminder. What y'all laughing at me about now?
Darren wants a big lighter.
Yeah, Darren wants a big lighter.
Don't give him real fire. Give him one of them fake candles. Paul wrote this letter from the city of Corinth. And I've said this before, but it bears repeating again tonight. Corinth was one of the most popular cities of that day. And the reason why is because you could compare it to modern day Vegas. It was wide open. It was the sin city of that era. Prostitution was so accepted and rampant that they built temples where the temple prostitutes lived, and that's where they sold their wares. Okay? So it was just an accepted, formal way of life. And it was a terrible place for people to be.
Sounds familiar.
And Paul had gone and ministered in Corinth. He established a church in Corinth. And if you'll recall, he wrote 2 letters to the church at Corinth, and it was the most problem-controlled church that he wrote to. Lots of problems. Beetle, would you step in there and turn that thermostat down from 70 to about 68? It was cold in here at 68, and now it's hot. I'm hot. So I also want to remind you, if you take away all of this Corinth, by the way, they had a saying in that day. If you were wicked and evil and acting that way, they said, oh, you're just acting the Corinthian. That's what they would say. It kind of ties in with what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, all right? So I want to remind you also, Paul wrote this to the Christians in Rome. And we just talked about this in those first 7 verses of Romans 13. And he talked about us being subject to the higher powers, which means governmental authorities. And you know, that kind of boils our blood. Things that are going on in our government right now. Most of you probably know. I don't know. I hadn't heard the news of today. Did the president sign? What's it called? It was originally called the Defense of Marriage Act. Now it's called the Respect for Marriage Act, and it will legalize in all 50 states same-sex marriage. And he was supposed to sign it into law today.
Oh, yeah, he had a big to-do. They rainbowed the Capitol and whole nine yards.
Well, he's the second president that rainbowed the Capitol.
Yeah.
Well, so under the Roman emperor, the Caesar at that time, was one of the most wicked ones. He hated Christians. And they used Christians for sport. They used Christians to fight to the death, to fight animals, to fight one another, to fight trained soldiers, knowing they were going to be killed. They had to submit to Roman authority. If not, resistance would bring judgment. So, in all of this backdrop, where Paul was when he wrote it, and to whom he wrote it, he says, what is needed is love. What is needed is love. Romans 13, verses 8 through 10, and let me read it. Remember, he's just finished in verse 7 talking about paying taxes. I think I'll wait till April and preach a sermon on that, all right? By the way, just to lighten the load a little, it reminds me of that guy Chuck Swindoll told this story originally. He wrote it in one of his books. I think the title of the book was Come Before Winter. But anyway, he said this guy wrote a letter to the IRS that said, Dear sirs, I cheated on my taxes last year, and I feel guilty and I can't sleep at night, so I'm sending you some of the money. P.S. If I still can't sleep, I'll send you the rest of it. I know he was a Baptist, all right? So he just talked about paying tribute to whom tribute is due, custom to custom, fear to fear, honor to honor. Verse 8. Owe no man anything. Now I want to stop and say this, and we'll get back to it later on and expand on it more. But there are people who take that one verse and say that a Christian should never have any debt. Well, most of us, most people I know would never have had a home if they hadn't went in debt. Yeah. I mean, you know, and a lot of us would never have a vehicle if we didn't go into debt. So you can't take one verse completely out of context and build a whole principle, a whole doctrine, a whole teaching on it. There are some good principles about that. We'll talk more about them in everything. So, owe no man anything but. So he said that. So there's a however, there's a but to it, all right? The only debt you really owe is to love one another. That's another one of those one another's that was on the back page of your last set of notes that I'm sure you don't have anymore. Yeah. That's all right. I've got them on my computer, all right? Say, listen, for he that loves one another has fulfilled the law. For this, listen, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness, thou shalt not covet, and if there be any other commandment, it is briefly comprehended in this saying, namely, thou shalt love thy neighbor as you love yourself. Love worketh no ill to his neighbor, therefore, love is the fulfilling of the law.
So what's the definition of neighbor?
We'll get to that because that goes back to a question
Yeah.
that Jesus was asked, all right? So, and he answered it. But we'll get to that as we go through this. 3 times in this section, Paul speaks of the need to love one another. Well, I want to tell you, as it was in the days when this was written, and it still is in our day, love is a very misunderstood term. All right? In the original Greek language, I've always heard that there were 3 words out of the Greek, of which most of the New Testament was translated from. There were 3 words out of the Greek that were translated in our English Bible, love. There are really more than that, all right? Really more than like 5, but 3 primarily. You will recognize the headings of these. One of these is the word phileo. And we get from that, it means brotherly love, all right? And I want to tell you all, I think we have good love and good fellowship in our church. I think sometimes we fail to show it and to exhibit it as much. I was at a funeral today in another denomination, and it amazed me how much those people, the men of that group, went out of their way to show and to say they loved one another. You say, well, Brother Paul, I just wasn't raised that way, and that's fine. But anyway, love can mean different things. Brotherly love. Another word in that original language was the word eros, and it means a sexual, a fleshly kind of love. But the word that meant more in a spiritual sense is the word that means that love that God had for us when he sent his son to be our Savior. Agape love. You hear a lot about agape love. But so it was misunderstood. And by the way, it's very misunderstood in our day. I don't want to get too brazen tonight, but there's a phrase that's been used for years. Well, I made love to somebody. Well, did you really? Because a lot of people correlate having sex with making love. Well, there's a lot of sex going on that doesn't have anything to do with love, especially in our society today. So I don't want to get off on that and chase it too far, but it's not just the word love that we need and that we need to understand. We need to have the real thing. So everything that Paul says in this section about love is based on one of the most familiar statements in the Bible, to love your neighbor as yourself. And that's found in Leviticus chapter number 19. Most people would trace that to the New Testament, but when Jesus said it, he was quoting the verse from the Old Testament, all right? Paul says this is the fulfillment of everything that God asks of us. Love your neighbor as you love yourself, all right? So, first thing we want to talk about tonight is found in verse number 8. And there is no way I have all of my notes. Look around. If you've got a copy that's got an outline on it, that's not just front and back. If yours is just in it, find it. Verse number 8. We probably won't get past that. And by the way, I don't have a watch, and I can't see what time it is on my phone.
6:59.
All right. We'll talk about this one tonight. Owe no man anything but to love one another. First of all, love is an unpaid debt. That's what he's saying, all right? Love is an unpaid debt. That goes back to what he said in verse number 7. He says, pay to all that you owe what you owe them. Taxes to whom taxes are owed. Revenue to whom revenue is. Respect to whom respect. Honor to whom honor, all right? And then he turns right around and he says in verse 8, don't owe anybody anything but to love one another. So he's not necessarily talking about a financial responsibility. And if you have a debt, it is a responsibility. We'll talk about that more when we get into it. Well, we'll talk about it right now. I'll tell you something happened. I was pastor in another town, and my daddy taught me we weren't rich people by any means. I don't think we were threadbare dirt poor when I was growing up. But my daddy taught me if you want something and you work, you can get it. And he added to that, if you'll pay your bills, you can get it. So credit wasn't a nasty thing in our house. And I remember when I was 14 years old, I had a job working at a grocery store in Prairie Grove. And I tried to be a help to my family. And I remember I went into Crescent Department Store and I said I wanted to buy some clothes. And I said, I want to pay it out on time. And they said, okay. And they let me. But I paid my bills. I'm not bragging. That's just the way I was taught growing up, all right? Well, I was about 15. I decided I wanted a motorcycle. And I'd had a motorcycle before. And Daddy said, well, if you can borrow the money, you can buy one. Well, the bank was open on Saturday. So when I got off on my lunch hour, I walked across the bank. Went in and saw Mr. Reef or Mr. Thompson, one of the two, and I sat down, and he said, what do you want? I said, I want to borrow $500 to buy a motorcycle. He said, does your dad care? And he said if I could borrow the money, I could do it. He picked the phone, called my daddy, and he said, all right, you can borrow the money, you know. But it paid my debt. So I learned at a young age that there are things you can have if you don't have the money in hand, and I'm not saying that's the way everyone should do it. But let me tell you a story that happened when I was pastoring a church in another town. I'm a grown man now. I had children. I'm not just a punk behind the ear kid anymore. I went into the bank, same bank I had a checking account, had a little bit of money in savings. And I went in and sat down. Everybody else I found out called it the beggar's bench, but I went in and sat down. They called my name, filled out a credit app. I went in, said, I want to borrow some money. What do you want to borrow? I said, I want to borrow $1,000 to buy a pickup. She said, you're a pastor, and she named off the church. And I said, yeah. And she said, we don't loan money to Baptist preachers.
Yeah.
And I said, do what? She said, we don't loan money to Baptist preachers. I said, why? She said, we've been bit too many times by Baptist preachers. It really hurt me that she singled out Baptist. It made me wonder. I didn't know, but it made me wonder if I'd have said, I'm a Methodist preacher. She'd have said, we don't want money to Methodist preachers. Or if I'd have said the Assembly of God. But she did. They refused to loan me any money. Didn't check my credit, didn't check anything. Just said no, based on one thing. Well, first of all, it infuriated me. I know y'all can't imagine that. Infuriated me so much, I went and took my money. I didn't have much money in the bank, but I took what money I had in savings. I took my money out of my check account, closed it down, walked across the road to the new bank, which happened to be a trailer house. They'd opened the new bank. I went in and said, I want to open an account. I want to put this in savings, and I want to borrow some money to buy a truck. Sat down, they loaned me the money. But looking back on that, I'm not a young preacher anymore. My guess is they'd been burned by preachers. And that hurts me. But I want to tell y'all something. If you pull up to a gas station, I want you to look around next time. They don't have a special pump there that says for preachers only. If you go through the checkout line at Harps, they don't have a checkout line that says for preachers only. What I'm telling you is, preachers are no different than anybody else.
There you go.
And we all ought to pay our debts. I'm amazed at the businessmen that I've talked to throughout the years. And they've told me, I mean, there's one organization that's been in business for like 75 years. And he told me we wrote off over $1 million worth of bad debt. $1 million worth of bad debt? I worked for a funeral home when I was in Kansas part-time. And the guy at the funeral home told me, he said, you know who has milked us out of money worse than anybody else? And I said, who? And they said, preachers. Why is that so? But my point is, just because you're a preacher doesn't put you on a pedestal, make you any different from any other Christian. Christians shouldn't have bad names. Now, listen, I know that things happen and people get into bind financially. I know that. I've been there myself, all right? Through circumstances that were beyond my control. And I'm even going to say this, and I know that there are preachers and there are Christians who will disagree with me, but I remember I talked to a banker about this one time, and I sat down with him and showed him from a biblical perspective that he could be wrong, and he told me later, he said, I think I was wrong. A lot of people think that bankruptcy is the worst thing in the world, but there are people who didn't intend to be put in that situation. And I've known people who knew they were going to declare bankruptcy, and they went out and bought everything they could buy on credit just so they could have things that they knew nobody could ever touch. And that's not right. And they're going to stand in judgment for that, okay? But there are people who have legitimate needs that was beyond their control. It might be an unexpected health issue. It might be just any other circumstances. And under the Judaistic law, owning the property that was allotted your family was the greatest inheritance you had. And if you lost your property because of debt, somebody tell me what happened in 7 years.
Redeemed.
It was redeemed. It was redeemed. Our original bankruptcy laws were designed after the scriptures. After you've declared bankruptcy in 7 years, you're released from that. All right? And I shared this with this banker friend of mine, and he had never considered that. He was a Christian man, and he came back later and he said, you know, I'm going to study that more, but I think you're right. There are legitimate instances where it's necessary. Okay? Now, if anybody gets up and says, well, you know what, I think I'm going to go out and buy me a new Ford Raptor Bronco that costs new Ford Raptor Bronco. I saw one on Facebook this week. $105,000 for a Ford Bronco, the Raptor edition. Yeah. You gonna go buy one, Charlie? If you do, buy two of them, all right? First of all, I couldn't afford to put gas in the thing.
Get an electric.
If I pay that much for something, it better make some money, so let's see.
Rick said get an electric. Yeah, that's gonna fly. I can see a Ford Raptor electric.
The Ford, what's that new Ford pickup, the electric, it's coming, got vehicle of the year or something, showed up TV yesterday, it was the, I don't know what they call it, it's a Lightning, Ford Lightning?
Ford Lightning electric?
Yeah.
That used to be a fast truck.
Yeah.
I doubt if it's gonna be
They
very
say
fast.
This one's pretty fast and powerful.
And them squirrels must be running fast in there, boy, turning that electricity. So we've covered that. What time is it now?
7:08.
All right. He says don't owe anybody anything. Don't borrow money that you don't intend to pay back. Circumstances may happen. That's just a good way to put that, all right? And I know people who have and people who do. I know our deacons who handle those people who come by our church needing help. They're always going to pay you back, aren't they? I got took really bad in Texas one year. Becky and I, Texas. You don't even need a fiddle in the band to get taken to Texas. But anyway, we stopped. We were coming back from Grand Canyon. We stopped when we got in Amarillo, and there was a big welcome center there. I might have told this story. But you go in, and it's got all things Texas. They had rattlesnakes in cages and horned toads. If you don't know what a horned toad is, don't ask, all right? But anyway, so you go in, there's a guest book there. Sign it, tell your name and where you're from. Well, I saw it sign. Paul and Becky Young, Gravette, Arkansas. Well, I went out in the car. Becky, she's in there shopping for something to give to the little grandkids, and this guy come up side of my car there, rolled the window down, and he said, I was wondering if you might help me. And I said, well, I don't know what's going on. And those of you who know me well know me, this is not my forte. Usually I say, nope, go work for it. But I didn't have a job to offer him right there, all right? But anyway, he said, well, my mom's in the hospital in Oklahoma City, and I'm just trying to get to Oklahoma City. It ain't that far from Amarillo to Oklahoma City. I just need some gas. I need $20 for gas. Well, $20 buy more gas back then than it will now. Anyway, I got my wallet out, and he said, what's your name? I said, Young. He said, that's my name. Well, before it was over, we were kin. So, but Becky come out, and she said, did you give that guy money? And I said, yeah, what was his story about? I said, first of all, he may be kin to me. And Becky said, he watched you sign that book. Ain't no telling how many people he scammed out of $20 that day. And he was kin to every one of them. All right. We'll talk about the debt of love we owe next time. I don't want my notes back now. I got them on the computer. I'll reprint them, and I ain't going to get them passed out to you again. Any word before we dismiss? Thank y'all for watching tonight, all of you who joined us on Facebook Live. We do have fun here.
You bet.
We do. We're a little bit crazy, but you got to be crazy sometimes. You got to be a little bit crazy to keep from going real crazy. I'm on the end. Thank y'all for joining us.